Welcome to the first edition of the new season, a view from a commentary box, and the commentary box in question is here at Scottish Gas Murrayfield, the new name for the stadium. And with me is Grahame MacGregor from BBC Radio Scotland, Euan Welsh from Borders Rugby Television, and the TalkSport commentator for the match between Scotland and Italy in the summer series, Stuart McFarlane. And Stuart, we'll start with you as well. The result, 25 points to 13 to Scotland. A lot of people saying, well, it's just a friendly and all the rest of it, but 50,000 people were in the stadium, and of course ranking points, very, very important.
It's never just a friendly when you've got a World Cup less than 2 months away. Individually and collectively, every player, regardless of which side they were playing on, would be aware of the importance of the game today. I mean, it was played in a very good spirit. Both sets of players really did keep a lid on emotions at different times in the contest. There was moments where it became very untidy. It was almost Keystone Cup-esque, but it certainly served a purpose, and that purpose was at this stage in the build-up and preparations to the World Cup to gauge where some of these players are, some of these players that are battling with others to remain in the plans and in the minds of the two head coaches as they look to trim down their squad. I mean, you're looking at potentially 9 or 10 of the wider Scotland squad being cut from the World Cup plans within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So today was an audition for them, and the supporters coming along, I think many of them would fully understand that. But it perhaps didn't have the blood and thunder of a Six Nations game or of a World Cup pool stage game, but there was still the full commitment there you'd expect from a set of players playing a full international game.
And certainly the first hour we had torrential rain as well, which made things interesting.
It did. I mean, it added another dimension, and things like that are important because, if you walk out onto a park, a pristine surface, not a breath of wind, pitch in excellent condition, players are clearly fit, more or less all of them we'd say are fit. That's an unrealistic scenario time after time after time. So you need the natural elements to perhaps play their part. They did. They made the ball greasy because it only started to rain significantly about 20-25 minutes before kick-off, and because there was no wind, the rain lingered around a bit longer than it perhaps would have done. So there was an adjustment there, and many of these players that have obviously played in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly the Scottish players, can adjust to that pretty quickly, I think.
Well, Grahame, it was a historic match because in the first time in Scottish history, which is well over 150 years, this was the first time that Scotland had played a home match against the same opposition. You've seen quite a few matches, of course, in your time going back to the 1950s, so can you confirm that?
Yes, not the 150, I was going to say. No, I mean, in many ways, they started and took over from where they were 2 months ago when they left here. Very close sides in both cases, although things are much sharper in the Six Nations, and both sides, I think, today, whilst being similar, both lacked a bit because many hadn't really played in 2 months. And just getting a game, they're saying Rory Darge is saying at the press conference, just getting an actual game, we all know this, under the belts, hard as you might make the training, is key because it's different. It's a lot harder, and both sides found that, and they kind of cancelled each other out in many ways today, a bit like what they were doing, and we know how close it was the last time. Italy almost scored in the dying seconds. Scotland raced away to score in the final minute there, and of course we did it again today, albeit we were ahead at that point. Talking about the weather, at the press conference, Gregor noted that in actual fact they've trained for about 8 weeks in nothing but dry, sunny weather, or indoors as the case may be. But I think most of it was outdoors, and that's the first time they've really had rain. And they, not looking for an excuse, they did find the handling that bit difficult, and they're going to try and focus a bit on that because that could easily happen again. But you've got to think, why are these matches held? Probably 2 reasons, and one is for players to put their hands up, or not, as the case may be. Although you do think that Gregor's bound to have an idea of his final cut already. And the other thing, of course, is actually just to get, as I was saying, just to get games under the belt and actually feel what it's like to hit hard and be hit hard and so on. And to that extent, both sides would benefit there today. Scotland, they'll be the actual final Scotland team, I think, will be not quite, but a bit different from that. There's no denying it. Finn Russell, players at that, and one or two others will be coming back in. So it was an opportunity for some to say, look, I'm here, I'm a new boy, or I'm not done yet, and whether or not they came through that way is an arguable point, and they'll be looking at the post-mortem. But it'll be a different thing entirely next week. We'll see a much stronger Scotland side, because we're playing the second best side in the world in 2 consecutive weeks, and that really will be a test. And I know that I think that Gregor will be putting in some of his key players that he's already decided will be in there. Today was more a chance for some of the fringe ones to say, yeah, look, I'm on the way up, and there's a chance for me. But did they show enough? That remains for Gregor to decide.
Well, someone who certainly showed plenty today was Ben Healy at number 10. Some incredible spiral kicks, making a lot of territory. And Euan, of course, another person who did rather well. Darcy Grahame getting his now 18th try, 2 of them today, and he came through unscathed as well, which is great after missing the Six Nations. And of course, he's almost a neighbour of yours, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's just good for Darcy after missing the Six Nations and then only picking up a couple of games at the end for Edinburgh this season. It's good for him to have had this game now where he can kind of get back into the swing of things, and he's naturally fell into the swing of things. I think let's no beat around the bush. There wasn't much for him to do in the 2 tries, but as a winger, sometimes that's just the case, and you've got to do the finishing, and he did manage to finish them. And plenty of people have messed up in these situations that he had to finish them.
I mentioned Ben Healy. He was pretty much on the top of your list as well, as player of the match there. Who else impressed you?
I actually thought Rory Darge was quite good, and he actually again mentioned it in his press conference that whilst he was captain, he liked to focus on his own performance as well. And I thought his personal performance, especially when you take into the fact that he was captain in his first game being captain, I thought he performed really well. And I actually thought that the general kind of people that would see themselves either named vice captains or the kind of leaders in the team actually worked quite well together. Your kind of seasoned campaigners and Ali Price and people like that who have got a wee bit more games behind them, they kind of helped encourage the boys who are a wee bit newer to the fold. But I think all round, I think everybody kind of accepted that the game was kind of a kind of pre-season friendly type kind of fixture. I don't think anybody was surprised by how it kind of unfolded, although we are kind of maybe slightly disappointed in sometimes when you don't get that exciting fixture that we're so used to seeing at Murrayfield.
Now, Stuart, of course, Ali Price that Euan mentioned there. Big challenge for him to get into the cut, isn't it? Because he's lost his place really to Ben White, and from a club level to George Horne as well. So he had to put in a big performance today. Did he do that?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty sound performance from him at 9 in terms of his distribution. I think you come into a game like this and you're aware of the opportunity that is presented to you. You're also aware of the competition you have that's sitting on the sidelines watching with interest. So it's about having that balance of not pushing too hard. You've got to push enough. You've got to sort of work the boundaries of your game, but at the same time, you don't want to be making catastrophic errors because that could seal the deal for someone else over and above you. So when you're in that position, when you're not necessarily feeling the incumbent 9, the starting 9 you were at one time, and you want to wrestle that back from somebody, a lot of it is down to character, and a lot of it is down to just having the calmness and the composure and believing in your A game that can be delivered time and again. Because even if the players that you are supplying with Soares ball are having a difficult afternoon, if you're presenting the opportunities to the players, then you're doing your part, and there's only so much you can then do. And there were a few occasions where there were some misunderstandings with the distribution, but it wasn't necessarily a case of pointing the finger at Price. But he comes in with a deal of composure. He is a player that we've talked about coming off the bench. Perhaps there's maybe a slightly better kicking game in terms of his box kicking. He doesn't get charged down quite as much maybe as the threat of that in the past. And he has that 50 plus caps, international experience, been to major tournaments before, and that will factor into the final decision as to where he sits in the pecking order as a 9.
Well, Grahame, they emptied the bench, Scotland did, and so did Italy. First of all, we had the completely new front row coming on at 45 minutes for Scotland, and they really did dominate.
Yeah, as a unit, that certainly the contrast was the clearest of all the various replacements which took place, and obviously all these replacements were planned. There was no injuries as far as I'm aware, and Gregor would have timed these probably in advance as well, and it gave him a chance to see, I think, most of the players. I think we saw quite a number of players there. We're not going to see all of the squad, I think, in the next 4 weeks, and I think things will really be firming up over the French matches. And the Georgian match, slightly different then, a bit difficult to look that far ahead at the moment, but I think it'd be more of a run out in a sense, without in any way disparaging Georgia. But the 2 French matches are the ones I think Gregor really put his most important players to the test on. He will want to see what happens there, and that starts next week, of course.
There were actually no injuries, so that will be an encouraging sign, because you don't want to lose your best players. And no yellow cards, unusual.
Yeah, I think it was almost after, I mean, in the last couple of seasons, you're seeing more cards come out and whatnot, and especially with the introduction of the bunker situation, it was almost that you wanted to see that kind of happen, to see what it kind of works out to be like. But yeah, I mean, there was no yellow cards, and I think on the injuries side of things, the fact that there's no injuries is obviously a huge benefit, and the fact that this is the first game of that kind of pre-season leading into the World Cup. But let's be honest, it's likely, and it would be very lucky if we were to get through the next couple of weeks without having that kind of one big name that would always be on the plane to France, not get there. I mean, most times there's that kind of headline name that has to miss out through injury, and I think that it's turned into a situation where you can't just rest players on the hope that they'll be ready for the South Africa game and that kind of World Cup opener. You've got to put your best players out there, and if they get injured, that's just part and parcel of the game. And I think the idea is that, yeah, it's great we've came through this week without any injuries, but of course you've still got a couple of big games left where you need to try and keep a hold of your best players.
Against some very physical sides as well, particularly the French games. And it doesn't come much more physical than against France on 2 consecutive weeks, and then Georgia as well. So there's some tough matches ahead, and of course it's very important to keep your best players on the pitch if you can. But as Euan said, you've got to give them game time too.
Yeah, that's always been the difficult balance. I think, particularly now in the professional era where you've got the physicality, and the physicality can sometimes be so ferocious that what maybe looks like a minor strain or a minor knock could effectively knock somebody out of a competition right in the very first game, or as Euan was saying, in the build-up to the World Cup. We have had, as you mentioned, players in the past that have missed out because they've sustained an injury in one of these games, maybe an innocuous challenge, but it's been enough because there's simply not been the recovery time to allow the player to get fit and come back and be part of the squad. So it's a difficult balancing act, and that's why it will be interesting just to find out when Gregor makes the selection, if it will be prior to the Georgia game, if it will be immediately after the Georgia game, how much he will know before the Georgian match in terms of who's going to be there, and obviously how he would deal with the disappointment of losing a key component to the side if a player was to become injured. I mean, you look at, talking of injuries, you look at the progress that Rory Darge has made in 11 months. When he suffered that injury against Cardiff in September, the feeling was, well, could that be him out of the Six Nations, and could there be a knock-on effect where his general fitness in game will not see him sharp enough for the World Cup? And that was in the immediate hours afterwards, that was the concern, because it appeared on the face of it to be a very significant injury, and how well he has come back and recovered from that, to go on and captain his side, 8th international cap, and to really throw himself into the mix in one of the most, in terms of the selection within the team, a position we have an embarrassment of riches when everybody's on form and when everybody's playing, and it's also about peaking. It's about getting players a bit sharper now, but fully ready, both mentally and physically, for the challenge that lies ahead in the form of South Africa, Tonga, Romania and Ireland. And that's just to get out the group, that's just to stay in the game.
Yeah, because we keep forgetting, don't we, that we're in a rather tough group, Grahame, aren't we, in the World Cup?
Oh yes, I hope we're there long enough to worry about fitness lasting through to November. Because of course that's really, it starts now, that build-up. and maintaining that kind of fitness that Stuart's saying throughout several months really. But yeah, we have of course South Africa and Ireland, and well, yes, deep breath, but we can now do our best, and you know, I think we have a pretty good core of players there, and MacGregor, I'm sure, will use his skill to get the best, 33 out of that, and all we can do then is just hope that everything comes right on the day, but that's a bit ahead yet, but next week will be a major first step really towards that. Today, yeah, it was the first step, but a major one next week when we play France, and second in the world, and the host side, and we're playing first of all here, of course, and then even worse, we're playing them in Paris the next week. But that will tell us a lot about a lot of things.
So what do you think Gregor Townsend's going to do? It's always hard to second guess what he is going to do, but is he going to put his full strength team out against France here at Murrayfield?
Yeah, absolutely. I think over the next 2 games against France, he'll play as strong a squad as possible, and then he'll have that Georgia week to kind of make tactical changes and rest some of the key players again, like he did today, ready for that first clash against South Africa. But I think the next 2 games are crucial for general confidence amongst everybody, and I think he'll put his strongest team at both times.
And Stuart McFarlane, last word to you.
I think there'll be a strong side against France. There could potentially be an even stronger side in France. So it'll be very interesting to see, you know, just the balance of the 23 in the next 2 weeks.
Well, that's it for this week. We'll be back again with View from the Commentary Box. Hope you can join us then, but in the meantime, thanks to Euan Welsh, Grahame MacGregor and Stuart McFarlane. And from me, Stuart Cameron, a very good evening.